You've been taught to fix everything. Fix your schedule, fix your mindset, fix your relationships, fix your flaws. But what if the constant fixing is the very thing keeping you stuck? What if the more you try to repair, the more tangled things become? There's a quiet truth that often goes unnoticed. Sometimes the act of fixing becomes a form of control, an attempt to mold life into a shape that feels safe, predictable. But life isn't a problem to be solved, it's an experience to be lived. When you stop trying to fix every discomfort, you begin to see things as they are, not as you fear them to be. You start to understand that not every crack needs sealing, not every silence needs filling. In the stillness, clarity emerges. In the acceptance, transformation begins. Because real change doesn't come from force, it comes from allowing. So pause for a moment, breathe and consider, what if letting things be is the first step to letting things change? You see, there's a reason why your greatest clarity often comes after you've given up. Not out of defeat, but surrender. A quiet decision within yourself that whispers, I've done what I could, now it's not mine to force. And that shift from doing to being changes everything. Because here's the catch. When you're constantly trying to fix something, you're affirming to yourself that something is broken. And when your mind believes something is broken, it can't see beauty, it can't feel peace. It only scans for flaws, errors, and loose ends to tie up. You start living like a mechanic in a world of emotional machinery, always tightening bolts that were never meant to be tightened, solving problems that didn't need solving, and exhausting yourself in the process. But when you pull back, not out of carelessness but out of wisdom, you begin to feel the rhythm of something deeper, something softer, more intelligent than the mind trying to fix things. Life has a way of working itself out when you stop interrupting it. The conversation that needed space begins to heal. The body that's been holding tension starts to relax. The mind that's been overthinking suddenly hears something quieter beneath all the noise. You didn't force that moment, you allowed it. That's the difference. This isn't about doing nothing out of laziness. It's about stepping aside when your interference is only adding resistance. It's about knowing the difference between effort and force, and realizing that forcing it is actually the opposite of flow. We weren't built to be in constant reaction mode. We're not designed to endlessly patch the cracks in everything we touch. Because sometimes, the most powerful shift doesn't come from action, it comes from presence. When you stop trying to constantly improve what's already enough, a strange thing happens. You notice it was enough the whole time. You were just too focused on the not enough to see it. We live in a world that tells us, keep fixing yourself, keep improving, keep tweaking, keep working on everything. And without realizing it, we turn life into a never-ending self-improvement project. But you're not a project. You're a person. And some things don't need fixing. They need accepting. You've been taught that letting go is failure, but often it's the only way real success sneaks in. It's not loud. It doesn't come with fireworks. It arrives quietly when you finally stop chasing it down like it owes you something. It shows up when your hands are open, not clenching. And this goes deeper than goals. It's about how you approach people, conversations, expectations, even your own emotions. Because when you keep poking and prodding at your experience, trying to mold it into something else, you miss what's actually there. You miss the calm between the words, the space between the plans, the richness of this moment, just as it is. Letting go isn't about detaching from life. It's about releasing your grip on how life should be. When you stop trying to fix your current reality, you finally open the door for it to shift on its own. And it's in that shift, the one you didn't control but welcomed, that everything starts to realign. Maybe not the way you expected, but often in a way that's even better than you imagined. You might think control equals power, but there is a quiet power in not needing control. In loosening the grip just enough to let things unfold. That's where life breathes. That's where real transformation begins, not through force, but through trust. Let's be honest, the endless fixing, it's exhausting. You try to fix your habits, your mindset, your past, your future. You try to fix your relationships, your productivity, your vibe, until your entire life becomes a checklist of flaws to repair. But here's the thing no one talks about. Fixing assumes brokenness. It assumes something's wrong with you, with your path, with your timing. And as long as you see it that way, you'll never stop tinkering. You'll always feel one step behind, even when everything is working out. Sometimes, nothing needs to be added. You just need to stop interfering. Have you noticed that the best moments, the ones that make you feel alive, often happen when you're not trying so hard, when you're not hyper-aware of yourself or micromanaging every emotion? There's a rhythm to that, a wisdom. And the more you get out of your own way, the clearer that rhythm becomes. You begin to realize that not every thought requires a response. Not every emotion demands a solution. Not every silence needs to be filled. When you stop trying to fix everything, your awareness sharpens. You begin to see people more clearly. You begin to feel more deeply, not because you're analyzing every detail, but because you're finally present enough to experience them. Growth doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, "Let it be." And that whisper holds more clarity than any book, podcast, or piece of advice ever could. Because once you stop fixing, you start noticing. And that noticing, that's where the truth lives. Here's something we rarely pause to admit. Fixing things can be a disguise for fear. Fear of sitting with the unknown. Fear of not being good enough unless we're improving something. Fear that if we don't control it now, it'll all fall apart later. So we stay busy, mentally editing our personalities, replaying conversations, tweaking our routines, trying new hacks, all in the name of becoming better. But that constant effort sends a message to your nervous system. Right now is not enough. It tells your brain to stay in hyper-alert mode, always scanning for what's wrong, what could break, what might disappoint. And ironically, that very state keeps you stuck in the loop you're trying to escape. Real progress isn't loud. It doesn't always show up in new habits or measurable gains. Sometimes it's just the quiet courage to sit with discomfort and not rush to fix it. That's where emotional maturity lives, in the pause between reaction and response. In that space where you realize not everything needs your intervention. Not every wave needs to be calmed. Some just need to rise and pass. And when you start letting those moments move through you without interference, something surprising happens. Life begins to stabilize on its own. The things you were so desperate to fix, some of them sort themselves out. Others simply stop mattering as much. And suddenly, you're not caught in your own resistance. You're flowing with life, not fighting against it. This doesn't mean you give up on growth. It means you stop fighting with yourself to get there. You stop patching cracks that don't need patching. You stop editing a version of yourself that was already whole. Progress doesn't require panic. Presence is enough. Sometimes what keeps life from moving isn't the external problem itself. It's the energy we bring when trying to solve it. You could be doing all the right things, journaling, meditating, planning, working on your goals. But if your energy is tight, anxious, restless, it's like trying to plant seeds in concrete. We don't often ask ourselves, why am I really trying to fix this? Is it because it truly needs attention? Or is it because I can't sit with how things are right now? There's a big difference between acting from peace and acting from panic. And the moment you realize that, something shifts. You begin to see how often your efforts are a reaction, not a response. You might find that half the things you're trying to change were never broken to begin with. They just didn't match the version of reality you thought you needed to feel okay. So you resisted, you pushed, you overmanaged. And in doing so, you blocked what could have naturally unfolded. Letting go isn't passivity, it's precision. It's choosing your battles with care. It's learning to trust that clarity comes after stillness, not during the storm of reaction. That's when new answers start showing up. That's when your energy changes, not because you did more, but because you did less from a better place. You'll start catching yourself before the spiral begins. You'll feel the urge to tweak, to fix, to micromanage, and you'll smile at it, not with judgment, but with awareness. Because now you know that the need to fix is often just fear in disguise. And when that fear doesn't control you anymore, you open up space. Space for the right solutions to arrive. Not forced, not pushed, but welcomed. There's a strange kind of wisdom that life holds. It doesn't need us to control every inch of it. In fact, the more we try to control, the more we miss the very things we're chasing. Love, peace, clarity, meaning. They tend to show up in the spaces where we aren't trying so hard. But most of us were taught the opposite, that peace comes from solving, that success comes from strategizing, that love comes from fixing ourselves into something more desirable. So we make life a checklist. We treat emotions like tasks. We try to heal just so we can move on. We read books not to grow, but to get ahead of the chaos. And slowly, we become detached from life itself. We're no longer present. We're performing. But here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to force your way through, life doesn't fall apart. It starts to fall into place. You begin to see the rhythm you've been drowning out. You notice small shifts, new people, softer thoughts, better timing. It's not always dramatic, but it's undeniable. Life starts making sense, not in a logical way, but in a felt way. Because when your energy becomes quiet, present, trusting, you stop blocking the very things you've been asking for. It's in this space that life speaks back, not with words, but with alignment, with synchronicities that feel too perfect to ignore, with clarity that doesn't need explanation, with a peace that doesn't come from fixing, but from finally allowing. And maybe that's what you've needed this whole time. Not another answer, not another solution, but permission to pause, to breathe, and to not fix anything for once. When you stop trying to fix everything, something unexpected happens. You start seeing things as they actually are, not through the lens of panic or urgency or guilt, but through clarity. And clarity, unlike control, doesn't rush. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't panic. It observes. This shift in energy is everything. Because when you're constantly in fix mode, you're sending a signal to your nervous system, to your subconscious, even to the world, that something is wrong with this moment, that it must be changed before it can be accepted. And that belief becomes your baseline. But the moment you allow this moment to be enough, not perfect, not solved, just enough, you step out of that loop. You stop running from discomfort and start learning from it. You stop chasing peace and start making room for it. This doesn't mean passivity. It doesn't mean you give up on effort or progress. It means your intention shifts. You're no longer moving from fear. You're moving from trust. You're not trying to escape pain. You're letting it teach you. And ironically, this makes you more powerful. Not because you're controlling more, but because you're finally aligned with what matters. Your actions carry more weight because they're no longer desperate. They're intentional. Your presence becomes magnetic, not because you're perfect, but because you're real. And people feel that. Opportunities find that. Life supports that. This is the power of stopping the endless need to fix. It's not about avoiding growth. It's about realizing that real growth begins when you stop trying to force it. Here's something that nobody really talks about. Most of your growth won't come from fixing anything. It will come from the moment you stop believing you're broken in the first place. That's the hidden loop we're all stuck in. We chase, tweak, overanalyze, constantly trying to optimize ourselves like machines. But what if it's not optimization you need? What if it's permission to be human, to not have every answer, to not be 3 steps ahead all the time, to not perform healing just to prove you're doing the work? Because when you pause the performance, when you stop fixing yourself like a project and just listen, really listen, something quiet rises. That's still part of you that was never broken to begin with, that knows how to breathe, how to rest, how to reset. You don't need to control every emotion. You don't need to solve your entire future tonight. And no, you don't need to make peace happen on your timeline. You're not a failure because you're still figuring things out. You're not late. You're living. So maybe today is not about changing anything. Maybe it's about realizing that when you stop fixing everything, you start reconnecting with what was working all along. If this landed with you, even just a little, drop the word enough in the comments. Let it be your reminder that even without the answers, you're still allowed to breathe here.